The only theme that would be really obvious in my work is just nature. I mean, sometimes it's fish, it used to be birds, and then there's always the riverbank. I grew up always going to fish for pinkeens in the Dodder. I naturally am fascinated by the way the water moves, the light on the water, the shadows, the reflections, the shadows and the reflections. After my accident, I didn't think that I wouldn't paint again. I had to pretend I was a child starting all over again. So literally how to hold a pencil. I broke my wrist and it was quite a bad break. So I had it surgically done. I developed this complex region pain syndrome and it triggers pain memory. So all the pain you might have ever felt, like a burn, a tear, a scratch, a scrape, or whatever. And it's all over the body. It's not localized. I couldn't use my hand at all. It was in a complete closed claw. It took about 3 years of casting, splinting to get it to open to the still deformed shape it's in, but at least now I can hold a brush, a pencil. This is a quick sketch I did before my accident. And I think you can see it's quite confident and free. Even in just the water used on the flowers, it's just very controlled, but at the same time free. And then this is the way I was drawing a few months after the accident, probably about 6 months after, just pushing the pen around, trying to get some sort of sense of control of what I was viewing. This one would have been done with watercolour crayon and very simple lines, very simple control. This is the way I'm working at the moment, which is perhaps richer. I'm using the pen in a different way. I'm using much shorter strokes and building up layers. It's interesting to compare the two then and now. A little bit different. I mean, there is some richness here, but this would have been done with a brush later. And this is just built with pen and pen, just going over it and going over it. When you paint with watercolour, which is what I was mostly practiced in, you have a confidence in line. I didn't have that anymore. So the ability to take a clean, long line was gone. Oil painting was much more forgiving. It allowed me to make mistakes and repair and fix in a way that watercolour or pen wouldn't have. So it was that difference, that new language that oil gave me. I work now with shorter marks, dots, dashes that I was able to do. And then, of course, you know, with the way the hand is, I use very long, very fine hair brushes to paint with because they allow me to fill up the brush with very liquidy paint. So I use a very, very long, loose brush just to get that feeling of the pen almost under my hand. And lucky, you know, you never forget how to mix colour. You never forget about perspective and composition. Those are things that are there. But the actual skill was relearned. And that process is it's an ongoing learning curve. I'm absolutely fascinated by the way light comes to trees, leaves, the textures and the effect of the water and the way it constantly changes. And trying to capture that moment with the millions of leaves and the ripples of the water is challenging to say the least. Last winter there was this really luminous lime green algae on the pond in Bushy Park. It was so surreal looking, no one would have believed its true colour. So that with the decaying leaves, and the bridge was inky blue, dark green ivy. So the whole combination was very rich and energetic. And as the green algae was separating and breaking up, little tiny pools of reflection were peeping through. And the canopy of the bare trees was so feathery and soft. I loved all the different textures together. I mean, trying to paint the shadows, the reflections, and the movement all at the same time is really, really challenging because there's so much going on and it's changing all the time. And you're there at the riverbank and you're trying desperately to move as fast as you can to capture that moment, that way, that day, that hour, in a country where the weather changes every 5 minutes. And then I go home, and then from my memory and what I have as fresh as I can on the canvas, I try to pull it together as much as I can. My neighbour has a gorgeous pond in her garden with koi carp. And I asked her, could I take my very large canvas in 5.5 feet by 4? Like I always do, I take my oil sticks and my oil pastels onto the location and sketch out as much information as possible. With the painting of the fish pond, though, I had to really, really work on the glazes and the thin layers to build up the effect of the light coming through the reeds while casting a shadow of the reeds, and then lighting up the fish the way they sparkle. Their scales are like gold and metallic looking. So that was really the great challenge of that painting. How important is painting to me? It's everything. Making, doing, drawing. It's the fibre of myself. It's everything that I am. In some ways, my injury has liberated my work. In some ways, my injury has made me dig deeper inside myself to possibly even try a bit harder. Because I don't have the control, because I have to find a new language from my brain to my hand. But it's been fantastically interesting, very frustrating, but also joyful.